Boom! We'll see how this works. I'm not quite sure, but I think it'll be good. I was trying to get the lav mic hooked up. It's actually hooked up, but it wasn't working. So we have this little Elgato here. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the stream, Flex. Welcome to the stream, Vinny. Welcome to the stream. Oh, I see Matt from Viper in here. Latrell, welcome to the stream. Nakudo, welcome. Snarks, good to see you here. 100 Air, what's going on, my dude? We got Metal Miner up in here. Offshore Miner. Splitfire, Jeff Rodriguez, Johnny, what's going on, dude? And Daniel Grayson. So I'm going to try to do this once a day or so for you guys while I'm out here, but I wanted to complete the day yesterday, and then I have a little bit of time before I head over to the speech from RFK Jr., which I'm really looking forward to. And I wanted to get some of my initial thoughts at least out to you all surrounding Bitcoin mining specifically, because the big panel that I visited yesterday, which is day one, right? That's kind of what we're wrapping up, was the large miners discussing the impact of the Bitcoin halving and where they see things going in the future, right? And I think that is going to be, let me mute that phone. I think that's going to be kind of extremely important for what we do, right? This channel from the very get-go has always been focused on the home miner, right? And dear Lord, everything's popping off. We might just have to give up on it. All of it muted. There we go. Sorry about that. So everything has been, from our perspective, or from my perspective, let me go back to why I do this in the first place, right? I've never been a Bitcoin miner, to be fair. And I think I always recognized what we're just seeing in the industry now as being the future of Bitcoin mining. That being said, it's just becoming more real. And this channel was really started to help everybody elevate their, their side income, gaining some sort of financial freedom, some more control over, even if it's just having enough money to decide what you want to do for work, or what industry you want to work in, or what kind of type of job that you want to do. Kind of that whole side of things. And then, I kind of lose sight of that a lot, but I got to thinking yesterday, and I don't know if I'm just getting a little bit more depressed surrounding Bitcoin mining, or if I just don't see the potential that Bitcoin initially held, when I start to realize that what I'm going to here, as far as consensus is concerned surrounding it, is a corporate event. That's very much what it feels like. And I never wanted to, I didn't get into mining because I just wanted to be in another corporate setting and eventually just work for one big mining company or something along those lines. That wasn't ever my intention. And to be fair, if that's yours and that was your goal, I'm not digging on you. I'm saying that wasn't my intention. And when I sat down, here's all the takeaways that I got from the speech yesterday. Or was a panel, right? So we had Fred Thiel, right, from, I always get it mixed up. Is that Marathon? I should have pulled it up. I tweeted the pictures yesterday. We had, and then Mike from Foundry, which I think those two really had a majority of the points that I found interesting. So both of them had, and including Hut 8 was there as well, all three of them kind of leveraged essentially hosting, or some form of hosting, or teaching people or helping them build out for hosting, to fund all of the infrastructure, right, for mining Bitcoin. And this meant that, at least for a period in time, you could get your Bitcoin miners hosted, and then from that perspective, you could essentially still participate within mining Bitcoin and be profitable to a certain extent and so on. but there's this new idea that's come along, and really I think it's important to discuss what the industry shift is as it pertains to specifically Bitcoin mining and what they're saying. So basically, the idea here is that even hosting is going the way of the dinosaur. And the term that a lot of people are utilizing is vertical integration. That means from the substation, right, to the warehouse, you own all of that infrastructure, right? And that the more of that infrastructure you control, the better you're going to be, right? These companies are looking at like heat exchange for crops and stuff like that. Lots of different ways to even like make this more profitable for industry and so on and so forth. But the idea is that there won't be even hosting companies within the, and this is the crazy timeline, there won't be hosting companies that will be viable within the next 6 months to a year as it pertains to Bitcoin mining, because the margins will be too thin and the efficiencies of the new mining rigs will make it extremely difficult for anybody to be competitive. And even if you are an owner-operator, this is part 2 to that, it was stated essentially that if you were paying over 5 cents per kilowatt hour, you won't survive in the Bitcoin mining market. So these are two like things that, like, obviously we know we have to keep power down, right? We have to keep costs down and then increase revenue and find clever ways to handle that. But I thought it was interesting that they came out kind of with this swinging with this movement from what, you know, over the past couple years has been, hey, look at these hosting companies, they're so great, to, okay, now we have all the infrastructure, let's stop hosting for everybody, because I think that's essentially what's going to happen. You need to be aware that if you have a hosting contract right now, you're not guaranteed that when that hosting contract ends that you're going to be able to renew. Because what they utilized you for was for the infrastructure. And now that they have the infrastructure and Bitmain is coming out with a bunch of new, more efficient miners, their plan will be to fill up all of that infrastructure with more efficient miners, kick out all the hostees, right? And then capitalize on basically now having you have funded their infrastructure so that now that they can profit off of that. That's essentially what's going to happen. Just so you guys get a heads up in the mining scene what that business strategy looks like. And the timeline was a lot faster and a little bit more shocking than I expected, to be completely frank and honest with you. Now, for what we do, I don't think that we're affected, like as far as my channel, locals, and so on, I don't think that we're impacted near as much by this from the GPU mining side of things, or of course any of that. Now, the only company that has transitioned into AI and high-powered computing that was on the panel was Hut 8. I did find it interesting that, you know, he asked like how Bitcoin miners are going to adopt to basically the changing space and so on and so forth. And Hut 8 started to talk about, you know, their high-powered compute, AI, and how they can just transfer their Bitcoin mining data centers to, you know, essentially these high-powered compute AI systems and so on. And I thought it was very smart from Mr. Thiel, I think is how you pronounce it. He said, he stopped him and said, no, you got it all wrong, because you're not taking into account that Bitcoin mining infrastructure is completely different than data center infrastructure. And he's correct, right? Whereas a Bitcoin mining infrastructure, it's mainly power. You don't need advanced cooling systems necessarily, even though a lot of people are moving in that realm of immersion and so on. It's not completely necessary. You don't need large networking setups for essentially big pipes coming in for good fiber connections, you know, for internet and all of that. You don't need the power redundancy, right? Because power redundancy in data center is important. You don't need the internet redundancy necessarily. I guess you do, but the power redundancy or the compute redundancy, right? Because you need power and compute redundancy for a data center. And you don't need, you know, that 24/7 uptime. So the infrastructure looks completely different. So I don't foresee at least if I'm like taking a step back and looking at the industry as a whole, I don't foresee actually a lot of competition specifically in the market of high power computing and GPUs, which is actually good news, right? That will be on the AI side, but we're not going to see Bitcoin mining money flow into that, right? You're going to see more of, separate companies that are specialized in data centers really working on that outside of the power infrastructure, right? So obviously the power infrastructure could be taken over and modified and converted into that realm, but I don't think that it didn't sound like to me either Marathon or Foundry, who basically the Foundry is more of they're all in one service. They help people set up mines more than anything. Obviously, you know them from having the largest mining pool, which is important. But that whole realm of companies doesn't appear to be moving in that direction outside of Hut 8. Now, I am curious what Hut 8's plan is there. I think there's still a huge misconception surrounding AI. So where you might have an advantage, just to give you guys an idea, is that almost nobody realizes that AI is just mining shit coins at the end of the day. Very few people realize that. They think that their, AI is actually doing AI, and they're building out these systems and they're like, yeah, it's for AI, but like 99% of that workload is crypto mining at this point. But that is good news from the perspective of these are ways that you can leverage it without even, at this point, to be honest, and something I've been doing a lot lately is like renting hash rate, right? You don't even have to essentially go buy equipment to get started mining cryptocurrency at this point and dipping your toes into alternative cryptos and speculative mining and so on. Having versatile equipment on the flip side to do that is valuable though, right? Watching Red Panda for CPU mining and starting off with spec mining CPU coins before they hit GPU, and then mining with the GPU and moving on and kind of going that route. So the final thing I think here, and then we'll get to some questions and answers, and I'm going to head out. But the final thing that I found interesting, because I've been saying this for a while, is they all did Bitcoin predictions at the end of the panel. And every single one had the same target between 200 and 250,000 US dollars for the projected price of Bitcoin in 2025. Now, this poses a problem. So the advantage that small miners had, or people that realized the pattern of the halving cycle, for example, that we had over big companies, is they hadn't quite figured out how Bitcoin functioned in that realm yet. The influence of the halving cycle wasn't an impact that large companies were fully aware of, but now a lot of them, like Luxor with their data analytics feeding in and so on, everybody's aware of this. So whereas I might have said like my mark was 210,000, it feels good to be right? But on the flip side of that, that means if everybody is aware of that, and this is just kind of my thoughts behind it, if everybody is aware of that, right, will it happen again? And I think that that's kind of what we will see, especially from, basically all of these companies are holding a majority of their Bitcoin right now, right? In anticipation for this drive up of price. And if their price targets are 210,000 and then it will repeat its cycle and come back down, okay, then they will all be incentivized to sell at that price target. And they are going to have a lot more capital and a lot more Bitcoin to sell and dump into the market than say you, I, or anybody else. The problem is that's going to affect every single other cryptocurrency out. So you might want to lower your price target for Bitcoin if you are basing it off of these price predictions, right? And so that means that really, for me, and not financial advice, I'm probably more looking at $150,000 to $180,000 price target to get the fuck out before everybody else tries to get the fuck out and the cycle continues, right? The only way that changes, and I think probably the biggest argument for Ethereum right now at the same time is if we get parity between transaction fees and block reward. And that's only happened for maybe a few hours out of the day after the halving with things like runes, which frankly just have a UX problem are never going to get solved at this point. It doesn't feel like that's going to take off. I don't see fees on Bitcoin hitting parity. However, we do have that sort of fee parity on the Ethereum ecosystem. So if there was going to be a decoupling, I think that this would be the cycle when we actually saw a decoupling between Bitcoin and Ethereum, a stronger decoupling, right? I guess technically some people say we are decoupled to a certain extent. I still don't think that's true. But if I thought at any point, when would that happen? I think it'll be now, because like I said, everybody's kind of realizing the cycle. But if everybody knows about the cycle, you can't capitalize on the cycle, right? Like it doesn't work, because if everybody's expecting to sell when it's high, then it's just going to become a race to who sells first, right? And at the end of the day, that just means that the sell target's got to be lower, right? Now, there are things outside of this that could influence it to go higher, but I don't think things like ETFs, which is a good takeaway I had from this talk too. They did talk about ETFs and the influence of the price. I mean, the general thought surrounding it, just to give you guys an idea, is that ETFs are kind of not an intelligent way to invest in Bitcoin, because if you're investing in Bitcoin through an ETF, and let's say you put in a purchase on Friday, that purchase won't go through until Monday, and it works on the stock market trading hours. So it's not, I suppose, it's not going to be as influential as people originally anticipated, I think. And there's good reason for that. Now, will that change later? Could that change? Possibly. I mean, if that gets rolled into a lot of different, 401k packages and so on like that, maybe it does have an influence. But the way they purchase the Bitcoin as well, there's a lot of room for manipulation from the large players there as to when they purchase and actually purchase the Bitcoin to add to the ETF and stuff like that, right? I mean, these are the problems with paper trading that we've talked about forever, or off-chain trading, right? So, I don't think ETFs will have an impact, especially after sitting down and listening to the panel. I think they convinced me of that. I know that we got Hawk in here with the hosting and so on, and so I hope that you guys are a little bit more enlightened on where the big players are moving from a hosting perspective. So I think it's going to be important that you understand those plays and understanding where that price target is to be competitive, because that price target to remain competitive right now is going to accelerate exponentially within this next 6 months to a year. I have an interview with Luxor that will be coming out later this week. You need to listen to it. You need to understand what he's saying and understand what he's talking about, because it's really going to influence your businesses, whether it's Coastal or whoever else, right? So I think, like I said, from our perspective, it doesn't change. From the GPU miner perspective, I don't think it changes much. I think GPU mining is probably the most profitable it's been in a long time. In a long time, right? Especially if you're into speculative mining or whatever it may be, right? You're probably doing pretty well. I think there's still a market for that because it still is very underground. And I think keeping the focus away from Bitcoin, and I think this is where I probably failed a little bit. Like, I'll still have the value within the ASICs to resell them, but I don't think I think I'm losing faith in the fact that I'll be able to be competitive on the network at all, right? Even with, all the firmware changes that have happened, all the options for control boards, all that sort of stuff. Even taking all of that into consideration, you have to consider the fact that everybody else has access to that. And if they can just throw money at the problem and outpower you, well, you're in trouble. Now, There is, of course, if you do have some SHA-256 miners, there are things like Bitcoin Cash or whatever it may be, and that probably will be the play, right? Why race against somebody on Bitcoin when you can race against way fewer people on Bitcoin Cash or something, which has its own problems from a principled standpoint, but, we're miners at the end of the day. We're going to find our job, and their job is changing too. And I think that's the big takeaway as well, is that they view their job as, and what they think they're going to do is basically be the new power utilities, right? Or the new power companies, right? So eventually what it ends up looking like from their perspective is they'll be power providers. And Bitcoin miners is just an ancillary piece to the power company, right? Because the big question has been like, power companies aren't moving fast enough to capitalize on the load balancing that Bitcoin mining offers, right? That sort of thing. Or the renewables that can be backed up by the Bitcoin mining and so on. So these guys really honestly do sound like they're prepping to move into the power space, right? The power and heat space, because that was another point that they brought up, utilizing that excess heat for industry and so on in areas and cases where it's needed. It's a lot about where you build, how close to the power plant it is, if there's an industrial plant that could utilize the heat next to it, all those sorts of things. From a hobbyist perspective, that's not going to be something that you can necessarily do. From the Bitcoin mining perspective, you will just end up having maybe a few IoT type devices that earn Bitcoin at the same time, or maybe heat your house and earn a few sats, but probably nothing that's actually going to get you out of the 9-to-5 rat race. And I think that's really what I've come down to. Obviously, if you saw some of my tweets from yesterday, I think that's where I'm coming to like a little bit of a fork in the road of like, well, I started the YouTube channel to bring everybody up, right? Like that's kind of was the intention. Like, hey, I figured this cool thing out that can help you make some extra money. We'll fight back against regulation and the government and the big banks and blah, blah, blah. And really, it's just turned into the same thing, right? I mean, it's large corporations taking control of the market and controlling the supply and the demand. And you are either, you're basically either the consumer or the consumed, right? And like at this point, like that shift is coming. I believe that's what Nick Burns, I was talking to him yesterday because I met up with him, and that was a line he used that I really liked. And if they're consuming all the energy, taking all the energy, and pumping it out, and you have no access to it, then how are you going to compete? There are ways to compete, don't get me wrong. There are still things to do, but is Bitcoin really going to be the path to that now? Like, can you be a at-home Bitcoin miner? Yeah, but you're not going to be profitable, I think is what my solution, or what my what my conclusion is at the end of the day, is you're just not going to be profitable. So, I'm definitely going to be reworking my strategy. I think I've kind of already worked out my strategy with the speculative mining and so on. Here's the odd part for me too. I could, if I wanted, right, I have enough connections, I have enough capital, I have enough expertise. I could probably just move completely into the Bitcoin mining space, shut down the YouTube channel, never talk to you fuckers again, and be completely fine. But that kind of defeats the entire purpose of what this was supposed to be from the get-go, right? And that doesn't serve the community. And so once I realized that, I think like, especially like last night, waking up this morning, thinking about a lot of that, definitely conflicted in a lot of it, right? And I think that's what you'll see a lot of people do too, right? I think we've seen, and it's not like, if you can do it, it's like, it's not a dig on you, but it's also like, that wasn't like the goal. Does that make sense? Like if you want to participate in that industry and that's what you like to do, and you got into it through my video somehow, and you're in the industry and you've become successful in it, that's cool. But that's not any different than any other industry. That's not different from me doing videos about Linux and teaching somebody a trade and then getting a job in the IT industry and making money, right? The point was to like, the playing field was supposed to be leveled, but it really just turned into the internet, right? Where the internet was a revolution and just a few people kind of got to the top, right? We had new wealthy class, right? We had the Zuckerbergs come on to the playing field, the Jeff Bezos. Prior to that, with the computer revolution, Bill Gates and so on. But that only creates a few. I just thought we were going to create more, I guess. I just thought we were going to create more. And now it just feels captured. And I guess that's what I'm struggling with. Anyways, let's get some questions, and then I got to get going. I got maybe like 15 minutes here, tops. So, Rabbit says he agrees ETFs are dumb. Just buying fake Bitcoin. Mind Something followed that up and said, especially when Coinbase doesn't actually hold BlackRock Bitcoin. What's going on, Pure? Oh, Varus arbitrage. I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. I finished the interview today, but I don't have time to go all the way into that. But there will be an interview with one of the lead developers, Mike from Varus Coin. I finished that today. I got an interview with Luxor. Tomorrow I'm doing a podcast with your friend Andy. I got like a few more interviews I need to figure out. There isn't a ton of proof of work here, right? Mindson says that Savatech ETH spot ETF could be a terrible thing for proof of work. There should have been consequences for their ICO. Sets a bad precedence. What do you mean for impact on proof of work, though? I mean, obviously, the bigger question would be, is that actually, so isn't ETH like, as ETH being proof of stake, wouldn't the ETF be more impactful and negative towards the decentralization of the nodes because people are not as incentivized to build nodes and provide security to the network? Right? Get my shoes and start putting them on. Ugh. Hey Elliot, thanks for the $5. In the industry directly because of videos on GPU mining, I now work for a company that does Bitcoin mining and has massive solar farms. Yeah, that one is interesting to me too because everybody wants to move into solar. But solar is a huge capital expenditure. So that really only solidifies my issue, right? Like, the barrier to entry is so high now. But that's great too. Like, I think it's great that you're working in that industry. It just makes me think about that. That capital expenditure is so high. Do you still have your 3090 RTX running? So I shut everything down but the BC250s and the 3070s and the 40 series GPUs. And then those are all getting shut down next week and put into storage until I move into a different space. Hopefully by winter I'll get moved into another space. Right, solar is tough to get into on scale, for sure. I mean, what can a total, home system's typically like what, 800 watts or something? Advice for small farmers, 9 CPUs and 12 random AMD and NVIDIA GPUs. Mine things that aren't listed on the exchange. And be the first to mine it. It sounds simple. It's hard to implement. It's the most profitable. Ted says, that's some attack. The big companies are loving the ETH ETF, seeing as all those ETH will just be sitting there and they will make some into nodes, so the company makes that money for the company. Interesting. Oh, okay. So, I mean, if you're selling an ETF, in theory, you could then on the back end spin up nodes for yourself and earn interest off those nodes and not pay those back into the ETF, right? Is that the idea behind that? Is that legal? It seems a little wild. Mindsign says, I just worry that the lack of distinguishing fair launches from VC coins diminishes the importance of proof of work from a regulation standpoint. Yeah, I mean, the problem is that the money talks. And if we're being completely honest, Ethereum's the most successful blockchain out right now. It beats Bitcoin. Like, if we're being completely honest, and you take a step back and say, what's being utilized the most? And what has actually revolutionized the space more than anything else? And it's Ethereum, right? Well, you're not seeing high transaction fees on a bunch of, on even Bitcoin. You're not seeing the kind of daily transaction throughput. Granted, sure, more money is going through Bitcoin, like value, but that's only because of the price of Bitcoin. That's not because of what's being used more. Am I going to the gym? No, I'm going to RFK. All right. I'm going to head out. Gandalf says, no, that's not legal. If they get yield, they'll have to pay a dividend on it, so they could pay 3 to 4% dividend and then still make 1%. Okay. Well, you have to have enough solar and batteries, Elliot. That's the problem, right? So you're not just talking about investing in solar panels, but you got to invest in the batteries as well. And with the advancement in that, with the advancement in batteries accelerating extremely quickly, your investment in a set of batteries is technically a bad investment. Because they're going to be worth a lot less in 5 years. Probably the panels too. So your batteries and your solar panels, they're a loss. I mean, sure, you can write them off as depreciation, right? But unless you're at scale, that doesn't make sense. But anyways, I got to go. Thanks for watching, guys. Be sure to hit the like, comment, subscribe, and notification bells down below. I'll try to get a wrap up of day 2 tomorrow. We'll cover arbitrage on Varus built into the nodes. So actually mining pools can take advantage of those. It's super cool. I'll start looking into that. I'll go into more detail on it tomorrow, though. I'll see you next Tuesday.